Welcome to another episode of Mike's Money Picks. Today on the podcast, we are going to be breaking down the 2025 Sanderson Farms Championship. It is the second event of the fall swing, the PGA Tour, and it has been a while since we've had a regular stroke play PGA Tour tournament. So we are here to break down the golf course itself, tell you what you can expect from the golf course and the golfers who are playing it, and then take a look at the stats and see if we can identify some golfers this week. They're going to be successful plays in DFS, betting, and one and done. So whatever action you got this week, we've got you covered. And we're going to do it all in 30 minutes or less. That is the guarantee here. We're going to talk about a lot of things in a very efficient way. If you've not already, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. That way you can be with us for the rest of our fall swing golf coverage, as well as all of our college football content that is coming out right now. And you will know when all the new episodes drop. As well as once next PGA Tour season starts, we will be here for that. And we will have a lot of off-season, like one-and-done style content because, that seems to be a success every year and people seem to enjoy it. So we're going to make another, once we get done with the fall swing, we're going to make another like one-and-done strategy video as well, if that pertains to you. But first, before we dive into the breakdown, there was a pretty big event in golf happening over the weekend. It was the Ryder Cup. We're going to recap the Ryder Cup. So basically, if you watch the Ryder Cup, you know the deal, you know the story. Friday and Saturday, not so good for the Americans. Sunday, quite good for the Americans, made for some quite entertaining TV, and it really, it got me off of football. Like I was watching the Ryder Cup on the big TV, and I was watching NFL Red Zone on the iPad on Sunday, and it was because all of those Sunday matches became compelling once the early results started rolling in, and then you had, each match kind of successfully thereafter mattered a little more, felt like there were a little more stakes, crowd was getting into it, like it became a very fun watch on Sunday. But the bottom line is that the Americans, the product that they put out on Friday and Saturday, just was not up to par with them being able to reasonably win that golf tournament. And so while I applaud the efforts and the grit and the tenacity to show up on Sunday and put up the showing that the Americans did, it was an absolute utter embarrassment on Thursday and Friday. And I don't know how you can come away from that Ryder Cup not thinking that everything in the U.S. Ryder Cup system needs to be overhauled, starting with the selection of the captain position, starting with the automatic qualifying points, and then looking at the captain selections themselves, and then the golf course setup. And the pairing selections, like just everything went bad this Ryder Cup for the Americans. Like I love Keegan Bradley, but I don't think picking him as captain was the right move because picking him as captain allowed him to kind of prioritize picking the team over picking himself when he would have been a much better player this week than some of the guys that the Americans were trotting out there. And then once you get into Keegan's captain's picks, first off, the automatic qualifying points allowed Harris English to qualify when the dude had no business being there. Like, I'm sorry, but you get one lucky runner-up in a major and all of a sudden you're a Ryder Cupper. I don't know. I think that it overweights majors. I think that the qualifying points, it kind of overweights runner-up finishes. I would rather see sustained success as opposed to just kind of one fluky finish from a guy like a Harris English and end up on that team. Harris English had no business playing on that team, and Keegan Bradley should not have rolled him out for more than one session, if we're being honest. Now, after that, the guys that Keegan picked, so like Keegan had this option between like the old guard U.S. Ryder Cuppers like JT, Cantlay, Morikawa, Jordan Spieth, Brooks Koepka. But he also had like this potential new wave of guys that he could have gone with. I'm talking Ben Griffin. I'm talking Akshay Bhatia. I'm talking Chris Gotterup. I'm talking Maverick McNeely. And what he did was he kind of ended up straddling the fence between the two of them and ended up making a team that just did not really fit. It just didn't fit. And then once the course setup is determined, y'all, I don't know why they turned Bethpage Black into a birdie fest. Like, all indications are that if you emphasize putting, that is going to hurt the American team because they don't have a lot of good putters, right? And it's going to help the Europeans because they do have a lot of good putters. But yet the course setup was turned into a birdie fest. And if you're going to turn it into a birdie fest, why are you not bringing guys that are good in birdie fest like Akshay Bhatia, like Chris Gotterup, like Maverick McNeely? Why are you then rolling out guys who are not great in birdie fests in foursomes matches? And you have Cam Young and Ben Griffin and Sam Burns on the bench when those guys are historically really good in those type of events. Like, I just think it was such a catastrophe from the initial captain selection through the captain's picks, through the course setup, through the individual pairings. Why are we putting Harris English and Colin Morikawa out there together? Just a total disaster that needs to be overhauled with the U.S. Ryder Cup system. but it probably won't happen because the rally on Sunday was so electric and so much fun that it kind of covers up how bad it was. But it was very clear that the Europeans had an extra leg on data in terms of who to pair with who, in terms of who to bring to the darn event, and in terms of how to play the golf course. Like, the Europeans just looked like a more well-run outfit. Like, it reminded me of like when you watch a college football game and you can just tell, oh, this team is not turning the ball over. This team is not committing penalties. This team is not beating themselves. That's the team that's usually going to win when talent is pretty close to even. And it is now, whether we like to believe it or not. And the Europeans are that. They did not beat themselves. They rolled the right pairings out there. They gained every possible optimal advantage that they could, and they beat us. And so, I hope that the 2027 Ryder Cup in Ireland goes much differently, but I think that the process needs to be reviewed for America if they want that result to go different. Because right now, Europe has gotten closer to even with the talent level, and their infrastructure and the way they set everything up is better than us, and that has allowed them to beat us the last two Ryder Cups. All right. Anyway, that does it for the Ryder Cup breakdown. Let's go ahead now and dive into the Sanderson. All right, so the Sanderson Farms Championship is being played at the Country Club of Jackson in, as Bruno Mars would say, Jackson, Mississippi. And so it is a routine event on the PGA Tour. It is by no means one of like the most glamorous, most notified, most well-known venues on the PGA Tour. It is not anything super special, but it does host this event every year, and it does give us actionable data to go off of. But the most notable thing in the Country Club of Jackson is it is a long golf course. It is a par 72. It is about 7,500 yards. And so it's a course that's, it's kind of a big boy golf course. Like, you're going to have to swing driver off the tee. You're going to have to play well with your long irons, and you're going to have to give yourself a chance to make a lot of putts, because aside from the course being long, it doesn't do a whole lot to separate itself in terms of difficulty. The greens are about average size. They don't really play super firm, super fast. The rough is cut super thick. There is not a lot of water hazards off the tee. There is not a whole lot of claustrophobic tree lines, and the rough is cut very short. So what you end up having is you end up having a golf course that is kind of long for long's sake. It is long, but that is the only defense of the golf course. And so what you end up with is you end up with guys wailing away driver off the tee because they can hit it pretty much anywhere in the park, giving themselves the closest approach shot possible because the course is quite long and you want to avoid a lot of long iron shots. And by giving yourself the closest approach shot possible, you hope to hit as many greens as possible, which you're going to have to do because you are going to have to make birdie putts here. The winning score here routinely is around the minus 20 mark. When you look at the average over the last few years, Kevin Yu and Sam Burns got to minus 23 and minus 22. Luke List and Mackenzie Hughes minus 18, minus 17. So, ever since the pandemic, it's about a minus 20 average for this tournament. So you're going to have to make a lot of birdies if you play well here. But like I said, it's a fairly simple, straightforward strategy. Driver off the tee, give yourself the best approach shot possible, make the putt. And so what that comes down to is you have to have a positive putting week if you want to win at this golf tournament. Now, when you handicap this and when you're picking players for your DraftKings lineups or your outright bets, does that mean that you can only play good putters? No, it does not, because bad putters can have a really good putting week. Last year here, Kevin Yu won this event, and he's one of the worst putters on the PGA Tour, but he gained 8 strokes putting this week. But he also gave himself the best opportunity to win off of that because he was also pretty darn good tee to green. And so he was a pretty darn good tee to green player overall. And so what you end up with here is you end up with this kind of combination of winners where you've got guys like Kevin Yu and Luke List, who are horrible putters, but great tee to green players, and had a great tee to green week and combined it with a great putting week. And then you also have guys like Mackenzie Hughes and Sam Burns, who are historically great putters, who were just, good enough tee to green, and then they just went totally nuclear on the greens and allowed that to be what separated them in the golf tournament. So what I'm really looking for this week in terms of the skill set is if you're not an above average off the tee player or approach player, I'm not really looking at you, because being good with the driver is a big time advantage this week, not because of the hazards that you're going to be avoiding with your accuracy, but because if you're good with the driver this week, then you are going to be able to put yourself in a position where you've got closer approach shots, which is going to make your life a lot easier as you go through this golf tournament, because closer approach shots, more greens in regulation leads to more birdies. And so when we are looking at the key stats this week, the number one key stat this week, as it is most weeks on the PGA Tour for me, is going to be strokes gained approach. I just don't think there's any way around being a good approach player this week. Like, yes, you have to be good off the tee, but I think you really have to be good on approach this week. I also want to look at strokes gained ball striking in general. That is approach play and off the tee. And then the scoring stats, so strokes gained putting on Bermuda greens. These are Bermuda greens, but we're back in the Southeast. And then I want to look at birdie or better as a stat. If you have the opportunity to look at opportunities as a stat, which measures how many close birdie putts the guys give themselves, that's another good stat to look at. But I want guys that are able to score. And, birdie or better just kind of like takes into account for, hey, you scored. How'd you get it there? Doesn't really matter. What matters is the fact that you got the ball in the cup one stroke under par. Now, the comp courses this week, it's a whole lot of courses that are driver heavy off the tee, low missed fairway penalty, and sometimes longer than average. And so the number one comp I have is actually the last event we saw, the Procore Championship, Silverado. I think that's a great comp. Basically, no missed fairway penalty, driver heavy off the tee. That's a little shorter than this place, but the skill set's pretty similar. I think Detroit Golf Club is a great example of this. I think TBC Craig Ranch is a great example of this. Two courses that are long for long's sake, but they provide no teeth in terms of difficulty. Guys are just able to really score well there. And then you kind of have a host of like other long but easy golf courses like Vidanta Vallarta, home of the Mexico Open, Corrales, home of the Corrales Punta Cana Championship, and Memorial Park in Houston, home of the Houston Open. So those are the courses that I'm looking at this week in terms of comping it to Country Club of Jackson. Forgot the name of the course there for a second. I knew we were talking about Sanderson Farms, forgot the name of the course. All right, let's take a quick breather, and then we are going to dive down the rabbit hole. Now, if you have been with us for a while, you know that when I say dive down the rabbit hole, I'm not talking about a literal rabbit hole. I'm talking about the rabbit hole, which is a tool from BetSperts Golf that allows you to build a custom model using all different types of filters and conditions in order to really isolate the skills that you want for a specific golfer on a specific golf course. It's been really helpful for me this year, and I think it's the best golf data site around. And I'm not getting paid to say that. I genuinely use it, and I think it's the best. And so we're going to take a look at the stats I'm looking at this week and who the best golfers in the field are at them. So one thing I did want to do this week, with it being a pretty much month and a half layover for most of the guys in this field, if not 2 months, right? Because we're now 3 weeks removed from the Procore, over a month removed from the Tour Championship, 2 months removed from the Wyndham. So a lot of these guys have not played in forever. So what I wanted to do was just kind of use strokes gained total for the calendar year 2025 as like a hard reset and just kind of measure who have been the best golfers in the field going back to January, long-term as opposed to short-term. And the best ones in the field are Andrew Putnam, Alex Smalley, Matt Wallace, Akshay Bhatia, Kevin Roy, and Cameron Champ as your top five there with some ties. Then I want to look at strokes gained off the tee for the calendar year 2025. Just who are the best drivers of the golf ball in the field? Rico Hoey, Cam Champ, Kevin Yu, Jesper Svensson, Isaiah Salinda. When you look at strokes gained strokes gained off the tee on driver heavy golf courses, it switches up a little bit. Cam Champ, Rico Hoey, Minwoo Lee, Kevin Yu, and Luke Clanton. And then I also want to look at courses with a low missed fairway penalty. And you get Cam Champ, Keith Mitchell, Jesper Svensson, Nicholas Norgard, and Luke Clanton as your top five. Then I want to look at strokes gained on approach for the calendar year 2025, just who have been the best approach players in the field this year. Henrik Norlander, Ben Coles, Akshay Bhatia, Rico Hoey, and Nikolai Højgaard. Strokes gained approach on longer than average golf courses in the last 2 years. We got Henrik Norlander, Tom Hoagie, Doug Gim, Antoine Rosner, and Keith Mitchell. Overall proximity, I really wanted to find a stat that would allow me to find just how close golfers put it to the hole or how often they put it close to the hole. I can't really find one on the rabbit hole that does that aside from proximity. And so the best in the field are Joel Damon, Isaiah Salinda, Michael Lasasso, Rico Hoey, and Taylor Dixon. Just pure birdie or better for the calendar year 2025. We got Akshay Bhatia, Garrick Higo, Nicholas Norgard, Norman Zhang, and Rasmus Højgaard. I'm sorry, that was Nicholas Norgard, who was third. Rasmus Højgaard was 5. Don't get your Danes confused, folks. Strokes gained putting on Bermuda greens, which I did factor quite big into my model this week. Taylor Montgomery, Mackenzie Hughes, Andrew Putnam, Bo Hostler, and Brant Snedeker. Then when you look at strokes gained total on courses that have a low missed fairway penalty, Akshay Bhatia, Alex Smalley, Steven Yeager, Chan Kim, and Justin Lauer. And then strokes gained total on all of my comp courses. We've got Akshay Bhatia, Steven Yeager, Eric Cole, Mackenzie Hughes, and Max Homa. Throw all that into a custom model. And I didn't like the result on this one, y'all. Nikolai Højgaard was number 1. Nikolai Højgaard, not a guy that I play very often, just because, the upside's there, but it's not a consistent profile what you get with Nikolai Højgaard. Granted, throughout the summer, he's been pretty consistent. He's been pretty good, but there's a lot of inconsistency in his game long term. Plus, he was at the Ryder Cup with his brother Rasmus. You can't convince me that the two of them haven't played rounds under the other one's name at some point. Both of them are here this week, so I don't know which one's going to be which one. Is Nikolai really Nikolai, or is Nikolai Rasmus? I don't know. You can't tell me that they haven't tried that before, though. And so he's also going to be coming off of a Ryder Cup celebration, celebrating with his brother and the rest of his teammates from 2 years ago. So I just don't think this is a good spot for Nikolai Højgaard. I don't think he's going to come in best of prep for this event. The guy I really like is number 2, Akshay Bhatia. So let's talk about Akshay. So if you're a long-term listener of this show, you know that I love Akshay. I just think his game translates really well to modern golf, and I think he's got the goods. And what I mean by that is you just look at his profile, and the guy is consistently really, really good with his irons. He is not a great around the green player. That does not matter at courses where you're hitting a lot of greens because, you're on the green already. He is a good total driver of golf ball. He's super long, but he's above average accuracy. And for some reason, he really ups his game on courses with a low missed fairway penalty. And he's not a great putter, but he has a ton of upside with the putter. And what I mean by that is when he does gain with the putter, he gains a lot. Like when he gained 6 strokes for the tournament at the Pro Tour, when he gained 4 strokes for the tournament at the 3M. I just think that this is a great spot for Akshay. And I think that he is genuinely the best or maybe top 3 golfers in this field peer-to-peer. And he's number 2 in my model, and I'm going to be playing him a ton in DFS this week. Keith Mitchell is number 3. I think that this is a really good Keith Mitchell course. I think that he also really benefits from kind of like the long-term reset this week because Keith Mitchell was not playing good golf at the end of the summer. He just was not. I was not very encouraged by what I saw at the Pro Tour, but what the model is telling me is that long-term, this is a great spot for Keith Mitchell, even though he's one of the worst putters of the golf ball on the PGA Tour. He's one of the best drivers of it, and he's a really good approach player. So I don't know. I made my mind up on Keith, but my models tell me that he's a really good long-term option here. 2 other guys near the top of the board. Really, the 3 guys near the top of the board that I like all popped up in the top 5 of my model, which is what I like to see, right? Especially without having to tinker with it, right? Davis Thompson was 4. Michael Thorbjornsen was 5. These 2 guys, I think, are guys to make bets on long-term. They are elite level drivers of the golf ball. They are above average putters more often than not, and they're above average approach players more often than not. Now, they're not particularly they're not like top 5 in approach. They're not Akshay on approach. But if we're saying that driving the ball and putting the ball is a little more value at this place than it normally is, you got to like Davis Thompson this week. You got to like Michael Thorbjornsen this week. Davis Thompson really at his best in the Southeast on Bermuda greens as well. So add that into kind of his repertoire. Thorbjornsen is just a super talented guy coming out of college that hasn't found it just yet. But remember Ludwig Oberg 2 years ago, played elite in the fall swing, capped it off with a win at the RSM Classic for his first career win. That's the roadmap for Thorbjornsen here this year. Rico Hoey is number 6. I love Rico Hoey this week. So Rico Hoey, if you were not aware, is literally statistically the worst putter on the PGA Tour. But I got good news. He switched to the broomstick putter at the Pro Tour Championship. And he was neutral on the greens, which he hadn't done in his last 5 events. And he placed T9 at that event being neutral on the greens. That's the type of upside that he has in terms of his ball striking. It's not unlike 2022 Scotty Scheffler before he really started piecing it together, where it's like, dude, if you just learn how to putt, you're going to win a lot of golf tournaments. He's kind of at that point. And if he does bring the putter this week, Rico Hoey's got winning upside. Love Rico Hoey this week. Kevin Yu, defending champ 7. Not going to be on him. I think last year's was kind of fluky. He's kind of falling out of form right now at the end of summer. Probably going to be a pass for me. Alex Smalley, 8. Nicholas Norgard, 9. Victor Perez, 10. Interesting results there. I really do like Perez this week. If you were to comp Victor Perez's game to one person, he's probably most similar to Akshay in terms of not super accurate, not super long off the tee, but a plus driver, generally a plus approach player, and has a ton of putting upside, not a great around the green player. So I think skill set wise, I do think this is a really good spot for Vic Perez. So he's definitely going to be a value play that makes my player pool in DFS. So there is the top 10 of the model. It's just Monday, though, so I'm going to mess with this model all week long. If you would like to know who makes the final top 10 of the model, go to the Patreon, patreon.com/MikesMoneyPicks. Every golf tournament, I post my core plays for DraftKings and FanDuel, as well as my model top 10 and a full write-up. Why? So if you're interested in that, sign patreon.com/MikesMoneyPicks is the place to go. All right, let's take a quick breather, and then let's take a look at the board as a whole, see if we can find some more guys we like this week. So we mentioned already that my love's near the top of the board this week in terms of a DFS perspective, in terms of a betting perspective. It's very clearly going to be Akshay, Davis Thompson, and Michael Thorbjornsen. From there, I got to find who's going to make my player pool in DFS. I think I'm willing to roll the dice on Minwoo Lee. The numbers have not been pretty generally, but he's getting a hard reset. He's been playing very well in Europe in the layover, and this is a great golf course for Minwoo Lee. He kind of sprays the driver all over the place, and he's a really good putter, and he's really good around the green player. So I think this is kind of a spot where Minwoo Lee could let his best clubs do the work for him. He has a lot of good finishes at the comp courses. I'm going to be here for Minwoo Lee. I'm going to be here for JT Poston as well. So JT Poston is a guy that and I'm going to kind of include Jacob Bridgman in this as well, is a guy that could just gain 10 strokes putting any given week, and he wouldn't really shock you. JT Poston has not had a good year, a good summer, but he's getting the hard reset of having a month off. And, this event could very easily be won by a guy that just totally goes nuclear with the putter. And really what I'm going to be looking to target this week is kind of one of two options. You think about the two archetypes of guys that have won this event. You have guys like Luke List and Kevin Yu, who are great tee green players, awful putters who had one good putting week. Or you think of guys like Sam Burns and Mackenzie Hughes, who are great putters who did just enough with the tee to green play. So I'm going to be kind of looking at that archetype, and Poston and Bridgman very much fit in the Sam Burns and Mackenzie Hughes archetype. Honestly, if I'm building a DraftKings lineup this week, I really think there's a big time fall off after Rico Hoey at $9,000. So I really think I want to prioritize getting two guys above $9,000 in my lineup this week. And I really think that it's possible the way pricing's set up. I really do like the 7K range this week. We're going to talk about a few of those guys. And I don't really want to dip down in the 6K this week. In the 8K range on DraftKings, or kind of the middle of the board betting wise, I really do like what I've seen out of Max Homa lately. 19th at the Pro Core, and I think that he's trending in the right direction. I really do. He's also a guy that could just go nuclear with the putter at any given moment, and he's generally a plus driver of the golf ball. Sam Stevens, love Sam Stevens on long courses. This is a long golf course last time I checked. Garrick Higo is an interesting case study. So Garrick Higo stormed onto the scene in 2021, one in Europe, one in America, was instantly supposedly the next big thing, right? Very quiet next 4 years of his career, comes back to the States, starts peaking, and bam, wins the Corrales Punta Cana Championship, one of my comp courses, earlier this year, and then falls right back out of form, right? Well, he was a T7 at the Pro Core, and you look at the courses that Garrick Higo has won at, like Congaree, like Corrales, long golf course where you can spray it off the tee. That kind of screams Garrick Higo, and he kind of really finds form fast and maintains it. So I do think that Garrick Higo is really worth a look here. You head lower on the board. I think Higo's actually a great bet to win the tournament, if I'm being honest. You look lower on the board, there's a few guys that have that nuclear putting upside, like Bo Hostler at $8,000, Pearson Cootie at $7,500, Taylor Moore at $7,500, Matty Schmidt at $7,400. All four of those guys are going to make my player pool for sure, because they just have the upside to go nuclear on the greens any given week. But I want to highlight Steven Yeager. I think that the way this event looks, like Steven Yeager was a guy that you just like at this type of golf course for a long time. And he played horribly over the summer, but he's getting a hard reset. And what do people on DraftKings when they play golfers normally do? They normally look at the recent form and how they're doing, right? So Steven Yeager is going to get docked for all that. And no one's going to give him credit for the fact that he plays well at this type of golf course and the fact that long term, he's a much better player than what this form shows. I also really like Jesper Svensson at $7,700. I think he kind of fits the Luke List, Kevin Yu archetype. He's generally not the best approach player long term, but he really heated up with his irons over the summer, and he's a guy that does have a ton of putting upside as well. So Jesper Svensson, probably going to make my player pool. Probably going to be a fairly wide player pool for me this week because there's just a wide range of outcomes on this type of golf course. Now, when you think of guys that belong in that kind of Luke List, Kevin Yu archetype, Doug Gim is like the king of that. He's like the king of Team No Putt. And you look at his history here, it hasn't been great, but he's playing better now than he ever has. It's not a bad spot for Doug Gim. Sami Valimaki, I also really, really like. You talk about great driver, check. Great approach player, check. Ability to go nuclear with the putter, check. Like, what more are you looking for Sami Valimaki? I think he's one of the best options in the field in DFS. In just first glance, he's probably going to be one of my favorite plays in the 7K range. Tom Kim is $7,300, and I will say anecdotally, this seems like it would be a really good spot for Tom Kim. Because it will allow him to separate with his approach plane with his putting. But looking at what he's been doing lately, it's been bad. And I actually got to see him in person at the Wyndham. He was one of the groups that I was kind of following. I was following the Akshay Spieth Adam Scott group, as well as the Tom Kim, Aaron Rai, Max Homa group. Don't quote me on that. I think Max Homa was the third player in that group. And Tom Kim was just playing so slow because he was so meticulous about his practice swings. You could tell he was not comfortable. He was not in a good headspace, and it just doesn't give me good vibes for playing him, even though talent-wise, he's probably one of the top 5 most talented guys in this field. After that, look, long term, I'm bullish on a lot of the guys at the bottom of the 7K range. Eric Cole, Hayden Springer, Ryo Hisatsune, Mac Meisner, Andrew Putnam, all 5 going to make my player pool, and that's probably going to fill out my player pool if I'm being totally honest. I do think that there's not a whole lot for you in the 6K range. Tristan Lawrence, I'll shout out because he did win in Europe quite recently. Thomas Rosenmuller is certainly in the Luke List and Kevin Yu archetype, and actually Luke List is in the $6,000 range as well. Ben Coles, you got an elite approach player that's a terrible putter. Maybe he could fit that archetype as well, but there's just not a whole lot to dig into in this 7K range, or 6K range, not a whole lot that I'm in for. David Lipsky did have a very good end to his summer. If you think that he continues that, maybe he would be a guy to look at as well. All right, so that does it for the board as a whole. Let's now talk about what you would do if you were playing one and done. So for one and done this week, y'all, if you're playing a fall swing one and done, I really wanted to join one of these. I just totally forgot to the day before the Pro Core because, college football season, it's NFL season, a lot going on with leagues and DraftKings and content, and just didn't get a chance to. But if you're playing a fall swing one and done, one thing that you need to keep in mind is the fall swing is for the guys who finished 50 to 100 and really 100 to 200 in the PGA Tour FedEx Cup standings last year, because those guys want to earn their spot or earn their tour card for next year or earn their spot in the signature events by being in the top 10 in the fall swing. And so you're going to see a lot of the same guys. Like, it's quite likely that you're going to see Davis Thompson, Michael Thorbjornsen, Luke Clanton at like every fall swing event, right? Like they're just going to show up because they want those points. They want to try to get into those signature events. So that's something to keep in mind when you're playing these guys, that like, hey, I really am probably going to see this guy again, and I want to make sure that I use them at a good course fit, in a course where they're going to be one of the favorites, right? Akshay and Jacob Bridgman, you might not see again because those guys did make it far in the FedEx Cup playoffs. And I don't know how well-traveled those guys are going to be in the rest of the fall swing. So Akshay is probably the guy that I would consider number one for a fall swing one and done, because I don't think he plays in Bermuda, Japan, Utah, or he might play in the RSM. But like, I don't think he plays in a lot of the remaining fall swing events. So definitely a guy I would be considering for a one and done. From a course fit perspective, I know Davis Thompson has won the RSM Classic before, but I think this is a great fit for him. I think this is a great fit for JT Poston as well. I also think this is a great fit for Rico Hoey. I don't think you're going to get a much better spot on the docket for Rico Hoey. So those would probably be the guys that I'll be looking at if I were playing a fall swing one and done. But all right, y'all, that is going to do it for this episode. Hold on. It looks like I can't tell if I'm still recording or not. Yeah, I'm still recording. Okay. Sorry about that delay, y'all. My StreamYard was totally frozen. Anyway, that's going to do it for this episode, y'all. So hopefully we're able to give you guys all the information that will allow you to pick some winners here for the Sanderson Farms Championship, whether you're playing DFS, betting, or one and done. While you're here, if the video helped you out, make sure you hit the like button. It really helps me out a ton when you guys do that, and I really do appreciate it. And subscribe to the channel. That way you can be with us for the rest of our fall swing and college football content coming your way the rest of the fall. But that's going to do it here for this episode, guys. Thank you guys for watching to this point. Best of luck to you guys with your DFS lineups and bets at the Sanderson Farms Championship. Thank you guys for watching and listening, and I will see you guys next time.